Good morning and welcome to the next episode of our podcast,
where we drink tea and navigate the balance between school and personal life.
I'm Sophia Safe.
And I'm Sophia Curry.
And this is Sip and Spill.
Welcome back to the Tea Journal.
The topic we'll be touching on today is the symptoms and effects of teen burnout.
So to start off, let's list some of the symptoms. So emotional and mental systems consist of exhaustion, irritability, anxiety, loss of interest, depression, difficulty concentrating, and feeling overwhelmed.
And I feel like a lot of these symptoms we've all felt at some point.
Definitely.
And I don't think just because you have a symptom necessarily means you have teen burnout, but it's definitely something worth looking into.
And it doesn't mean you are, even if you are burnt out, you don't have all of these symptoms. That doesn't necessarily mean like your feelings are discounted or you're not burnt out. Like, everybody's different.
No, 100%. So let's dive into some of these symptoms. So in terms of exhaustion, it would be something like a constant feeling of being tired, and that's especially even after adequate sleep.
Yes. I think a lot of teens experience this, especially with, we'll talk about in our interview with Sophia, how fast-paced society is.
Absolutely.
And there's a lot of pressure. I think pressure has grown nowadays. And
we talk about that in a lot of our episodes.
Yeah, and I think it's something that's really important to shine a light on. So exhaustion is a huge thing. And then to go more into irritability, which, I know a lot of teens are already irritable just because we have jacked up hormones.
Oh, absolutely.
Or, figuring out life. But also, burnout does not help. So irritability would be increased sensitivity to criticism, heightened emotions, and difficulty managing anger.
Which I feel like you and I have both experienced.
Definitely.
Not controlling our anger. Not to say that's at each other necessarily, but in general, it's hard to control your emotions, especially when you're trying to control everything else in your life and you are unable to.
And I think we're all on a really unique journey with our own burnout. Like, no one's going to recover the same way. Like, some people might use similar coping mechanisms, but we're not going to recover in similar ways, I guess is the right way of saying it. Like, just these past few months of, going to therapy and it's been, I'd say sensitivity to criticism, like increased sensitivity is definitely like it's heightened. And I know my mom has told me, like, you gotta kind of listen to people and maybe not get defensive. And I think a lot of people find that. I feel like especially teens find criticism really hard to take even on a normal scale because it's just, nobody wants to hear they're doing something wrong.
Yeah.
So I feel like everything's just even more heightened.
Agreed, including like the feeling of being overwhelmed or restless and especially excessive worry.
Oh, definitely.
I feel like, well, that's another symptom, anxiety.
Yes.
I feel like I get a lot more anxious when I'm feeling more burnt out.
Oh, for sure.
You would think that it might be the feeling of like, I don't care anymore, I'm done. But honestly, with that feeling also comes anxiety where it's like, what are the consequences of my lack of interest?
Oh, yeah. And then there's also like depression, and you can dip into this feeling of sadness, hopelessness, and loss of interest in life in general.
Right.
And that doesn't necessarily mean you're suicidal. That could also just mean like you get up and you go through the day and just almost like the world is like a blur around you and you're just kind of like, you feel lost. Everything is just kind of like moving and you're just kind of like, I don't know, I guess wandering.
I feel like what comes with that is a loss of interest, like you said, in life. Also a decrease in enjoyment or what might be previously fun, and a lack of motivation.
And we talked about this in our interview segment. Unfortunately, Sophia wasn't able to join me, and so there's a lot of Sophias in this episode. I interviewed Sophia, but Sophia unfortunately wasn't able to be there. But one of the things that we did talk about was that loss of interest in things that you found previously fun. And that's, I think, a big telltale sign that, hey, you might be getting burnt out.
Yeah.
And I know I definitely have experienced that, and we can definitely go into, a little bit of our own personal journeys and experiences with burnout or burnout. Yeah. But let's touch into physical systems or symptoms of it. So the first one we have is sleep disturbances. So we talked about this in our interview again too. But there's insomnia, nightmares, or disrupted sleep cycles. So, I feel like a lot of nightmares can come as a result of other things you might be dealing with. Like you might have nightmares about stuff in your life. I know I've definitely experienced that too. And I just I'll wake up in a cold sweat and be like, oh my God, and think it happened. And then I'll be like, oh.
Yeah, it's not. I know I had a really bad dream at some point, and the entire 2 days I couldn't even talk about it, otherwise I'd break down.
Oh, I remember that.
Right.
That was terrible.
It was horrible. But then what comes with it is just a disrupted sleep schedule.
Yeah.
You can't fall asleep easy. You wake up repeatedly.
I feel restlessness too. Absolutely. During your sleep, just not getting a good sleep either. Even if there's a big thing about how much time you're supposed to sleep, and everybody's different, and then ideally it sounds like 11 hours of sleep sounds like wow, but that's actually that's not good. Yeah, I feel like you can get over rested.
Yes, and even that that feels, it's not, you know what I mean?
Yeah. I'm trying to how do you put that into words? No, yeah. I mean, if you get it, you get it. We'll probably circle back.
Yeah, okay. Well, another physical symptom are frequent headaches or stomach aches, which are physical manifestations of stress. I know for a fact I deal with stress stomach aches. I feel like now that school has just ended for us, this weekend is the first of summer, technically. And
unless you have finals.
Unless you have finals. But I still feel like today's Sunday right now when we're recording this. And I still feel like I need to do my homework before Monday. And I'm stressed because I haven't done any of it yet. Friday night, I had to open my AP World summer assignment and start it because I couldn't, it felt wrong.
Yes.
Just relaxing.
I also agree today. I have felt that way too. And I'm worried about this coming week, being off. Summer ideally sounds fun, but one of the things, again, that I also talked about in the interview was that feeling of having to constantly be productive.
Yes.
And that taking a break doesn't feel productive. And one of the things Sophia said that I really liked was, but taking a break essentially is productive because you're allowing your body to recharge to continue moving forward and doing your work and moving through life, and that in and of itself is something productive.
That's a good point.
You're doing something, and I was like, that's a good way to look at it. Yes, taking a break can seem as unproductive because you're not doing, necessarily work on stuff in front of you, but your work is more geared toward yourself.
And I feel like when you're taking you have to take healthy breaks. It can't just be you.
We talked about that too.
On your exactly. It can't just be you on your phone. It has to be productive breaks. I don't know how else to say that, but doing something you enjoy that's not on a device, like taking a walk.
And one of the things Sophia also said that I also really like, she's like, even sometimes it's okay to get on your phone. She's like, it's all about setting a limit. And can you stick to that limit? You got to be able to stick to that. And so I can definitely say I've experienced, frequent headaches and stomach aches. And it's definitely something that I think a lot of people struggle with. And I think people ignore physical manifestations of stress because it feels like
it could be something else.
It feels like it could be something else, or it's just I think it's easier to discount stress if there's not something physical. I think a lot of people don't realize that a lot of mental and emotional feelings can manifest physically.
Agreed.
For example, this is completely unrelated to burnout, but when I'm really upset, or I'm really sad and I'm going through something really hard emotionally, my body will physically like ache everywhere.
Agreed. I feel like stomach aches and headaches are frequent like aches that you have.
Not even just like stomach aches and headaches, like my arms and hands will hurt.
Really?
Like I will get like, it's like a weird type of pain. I describe it more as like an uncomfortableness, but it's just like it feels like every nerve in my body is like aching in a sense. It's such a weird feeling. I can't even describe it, but there's definitely a physical manifestation like that's as a result of that pain. So I think people often discount physical manifestations of emotional distress, which moves into the next physical symptom. We'll talk about fatigue. So
fatigue is feeling constantly tired and lacking energy, which I feel like we touched on earlier when we talked about depression and lack of interest. However, we also talked about it when we talked about exhaustion, where even if you get enough sleep or you think you got a lot of sleep, you still feel tired and you still don't want to do anything.
And this is just hereby showing that physical and emotional symptoms tie together and can bounce off one another and come as a result of the other. And I think definitely just today I felt it before like me and Sophia got together. Like I told my mom, hey, I'm sorry if I like seem really irritable right now. For whatever reason, my mood is just down. And I think because the school year has just ended and I'm really burnt out. Like my dad said something to me a couple weeks ago and he was like, how's the end of the year winding down for you? And I literally laughed and I was like,
winding down?
Yup, exactly. That's exactly what I said. I was like, winding down? I was like, yeah, more like ramping it up.
Literally. What's with all of the projects and everything being at the literal last week?
Yeah.
Tell me why I had a test on Thursday.
I always love to joke, and this is not to shame teachers. Like they definitely have their own thing, and they definitely have their reasons.
Oh, absolutely.
But I always joke that the teachers love to throw in everything they wanted to do ever in the entire year in the like last few weeks of school.
It's impossible.
And I'm just like, bro, I know you're just as tired as I am. Why are you doing this?
So let's move on to some behavioral changes that you might experience when you're experiencing teen burnout.
Okay.
So, do you want to start?
Sure. So, first one we have listed here is withdrawal. So, withdrawal can be becoming more isolated and less communicative.
No, do you want to go?
No, go ahead.
I feel like this comes with when you're done with your work at the end of the day and you just don't want to talk to anyone. You are drained from everything you have done and you snap back at those around you. And you just want to be on your own, and it's not healthy.
Well, I do want to say that's okay to have that healthy boundary, for sure.
Absolutely.
Like, if you need that space, I definitely think that's okay. But I think there's a certain point where if you consistently feel that way throughout, not even just after your workday, but throughout the entire day, you're just exhausted with talking to people, and you don't really want to, and you just want to be alone the whole time, which I think is very common in teens, and we see it a lot. And I think I'd like to get I don't know if there's any studies on this, because I'm like, this is something that's more like culturally, I think, parents just say, oh, my teens love to be in their hole or sit in the dark and da-da-da. But I wonder, as, society has progressed, if there has been like a correlation with, teens, shying away in their rooms versus, maybe being more sociable and being more out and about. And I feel like there has been, just by studying the culture and, hearing how people talk about the differences of social life.
Yeah.
So I feel like there's probably
we've shifted from in-person communication to online communication a lot more, obviously. And I feel like that is in addition to what we experience.
Which I think is so ironic, because we're like, oh, everybody's even more, we're so connected, we've become disconnected.
Oh, yeah.
You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
Like, we can call somebody across the world, and yet, like, we connect with the person right next to us?
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah.
And I heard that somewhere, and I was just like, it's a funny irony there that, we can be so connected to everybody around us, digitally and in a more literal sense, but emotionally and like in a social sense, are we really that connected? No. And then the next thing we can talk about is increased sensitivity. So that would be overreacting to situations and becoming easily upset. I think we definitely touched on that in irritability when we talked about irritability. And we're starting to see how they all, connect back to one another.
Absolutely.
I think I've experienced increased sensitivity.
Oh, 100%. You can tell.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
But I think I saw myself kind of accept it too.
Really? What do you mean by that?
So one of the things that we talked about with Sophia, and I like this, and I think this should be our mantra for this episode. It's acceptance is huge. So when you're recovering from burnout, one of the things you have to do is accept and, well, number one, recognize your behavior and then accept it. And this goes for things unrelated to burnout too.
Okay, what do you mean?
So let's focus more on the burnout aspect. So I know I'm definitely burnout, and I think a lot of teens know that because they can recognize that.
Sorry,
it's okay. I think a lot of teens recognize that they're burnt out because I think we all know those symptoms.
Oh, absolutely.
And we all know that we have those symptoms. So we can recognize it, but are you willing to accept some of these behaviors?
And I feel like when it comes to acceptance, you can also figure out how to mitigate those symptoms as well.
Like you can't truly change something if you don't accept that it's happening first, if you know what I mean. Like if someone wanted to stop being defensive, they had to first recognize that they are defensive and accept that is their behavior instead of being like in denial or something. And then they can therefore say, I accept that I am this way. How can I work to change it?
And obviously not with those exact words, but another symptom when it comes to behavioral changes are changes in eating habits. And I feel like I've definitely experienced that when I'm burnt out. I feel like I start to boredom eat and just
I was doing
going.
That today.
Yeah.
That was one of the things I was saying earlier, was when I was telling my mom, hey, I'm really sorry that I'm irritable. Like, my mood is just down, and I think I'm burnt out from the end of the year. And I just was like, I feel like I should be eating more carbs right now because, carbs boost your energy, but carbs are also bad for you if you're not doing anything with that energy. So then it, builds up, and that's not good for your health. I don't even want to call it like boredom eating. I think people eat like because they're like trying to increase their energy and it's not working, and so you just keep eating and you feel like, oh, I'm not eating the right things. Like, I'm not even necessarily eating junk. Like, I ate several fruits. I try to eat like a good healthy cereal. Like, I eat like the multigrain Cheerios cereal.
I love the multigrain Cheerios.
Me too. Which I know we had a conversation about that.
We did, yes. And we also talked about in a previous episode how good foods are for your energy and how they're better than eating junk. And I feel like substituting, when it comes to changing in your eating habits, and if you start to excessively overeat, switching junk for fruits is a great idea. Even though it might not be fully great if you are experiencing burnout. It's not something easy to combat.
So I think one of the things we can say is I think there are steps. These are unofficial, so these are not like official quote-unquote steps, like, like stages of grief. But I think there are stages to growing from burnout, and first recognizing it, accepting it, and then working to change. So, I think changing those foods out first
is a good first step.
It's a good first step to changing that habit.
Another symptom is neglecting self-care, which is lacking attention to hygiene, grooming, and overall well-being.
Yeah. Okay. So, I mean, I think I find this really funny because everybody's like, oh, self-care, my 15-step Korean skincare routine, and yet they're like...
I, at one point, had a surprisingly long skincare routine, and after the school year, it fell apart.
After the school year?
Not after, like during the school year.
Okay, I was going to say, during the school year, I feel like that would fall out.
I used to have so much fun doing it, and it was like...
Honestly, yeah.
All the steps, and it wasn't even that long. It was just fun to do, and now I just can't get myself to, like, do it. It's, like, tedious now.
It's fun to take care of yourself, though.
It is.
Like, I like doing... Yeah. Like, I always laugh whenever I have a sleepover. Is when I actually do my skincare.
Sophia and I actually had a sleepover recently, and we talked about this. And
oh my god,
we were so much healthier when we had a sleepover. We did our skincare at night. We woke up in the morning and we did yoga, and it was so great.
It was great. I was like, I have never. And then I told her, so because we went to school together, and I said, I really wish I could have a sleepover with you tomorrow night because I know for sure I will not get up this good tomorrow. Exactly. And was I right? Yes, I was. And I did not get up good for the rest of the week. And it was just like... But honestly, yeah, so neglecting your self-care, even if you still have that quote-unquote 15-step Korean skincare routine, that's not necessarily like self-care. Like, there are different versions of self-care, and we touched on this in our 5th episode. And you can go back and listen to that if you want a more in-depth explanation on, healthy self-care skincare.
Which is a part of self-care. So there are also long-term consequences when it comes to teen burnout and not addressing it right.
Oh, for sure.
So the first one is an increased risk of anxiety and depression. And we touched on this both in the behavioral effects and the emotional and mental symptoms, where burnout can contribute to the development of mental health issues.
Yes.
And of course, that's not necessarily the case 100% of the time, but it's definitely a trend that's been seen.
Oh, yeah. And I think I don't want to, scare people, but there's a high risk of that because of just burnout is something serious. Like, it doesn't sound serious, but I mean, you're burning out. Like, you should not be... This is a good analogy that I like, to take the burnout with a literal meaning. Say you're a candle, and at the beginning of your life, you have a candle full of energy, and you're lighting it, and okay, it's burning. However, if you let it burn too much, then it's gone. Your flame's extinguished. You're exhausted. You have no energy. That flame is your energy. It's gone. So now you're like extinguished. There's no, I don't want to say light behind your eyes, but for lack of a better term, there's no light in your existence. There's no fuel. There's no energy. You're burnt out. So you don't want to get to a point where your candle is, like literally like gone or low. Like, you want to be able to healthily like sustain that and say, how can I make sure that I'm conserving my energy, putting more time and effort into increasing it, and just staying healthy overall.
And when it comes to that, a lot of people turn to unhealthy ways of regaining that fuel, such as substance use or even self-harm.
And not even to regain the fuel, but to maybe escape that feeling.
That's a good point.
Like, getting high can, like, definitely gives you that feeling of euphoria and I'm not speaking from experience, but, these are just the classic symptoms of, getting high and using drugs. And, like, I mean, there's, like, what me and Sophia learned, we had a whole unit basically on this in our, like, HBS, Human Body Systems class, and we learned about how these drugs affect your body, and, they're chemicals, and it was cool, but also, really upsetting to see how they work, because it's just, like, personally for me, I was like, I wish people could see this and like take it seriously, because I think we only take it seriously if it's happening in front of our eyes.
Agreed.
If we can't see it, and I was like, it's very much, I feel, harder to take seriously.
We talked about this a lot too in a previous episode, where it's easier to address things that you can see, such as mental illness. It's easy to address physical symptoms rather than the mental symptoms.
And sometimes it's easier to ignore the physical symptoms, too, and discount them and, like we were saying earlier, attribute them to something else.
Agreed. So in severe cases of burnout, burnout itself can lead to self-harm behaviors and suicidal ideation. And again, that's not true 100% of the time, but if your burnout is left unchecked, this is a possible symptom.
Yeah. And then academic decline is another one.
I feel like a lot of people have experienced academic decline due to their burnout. I know for a fact I have. Especially at the beginning of the year when you're starting to get started, it's okay. And then like the entire heavy course load actually starts to weigh down on you, and you're like, I cannot do this.
Yeah. And that's one of the things, honestly, I'm really worried about next year, and I probably should have made a smarter decision in class taking, but, junior year is an intense, hard year, and that's the year that colleges, crack down and really look at what you did, and that's an immense pressure. But, to talk back on what we talked about with our math teacher in episode 9, it's okay not to take those hard classes and everything, and honestly, I don't think my college will care if I'm going pre-med and they see I took a pre-world in junior year. They're probably not going to care. But, somehow when you register for your courses, it feels necessary.
Agreed, yes.
And so just the weight of, even if you are smart, you are still susceptible to, declining academically because of the pressure.
And we talked about this earlier, but reduced social interaction is also a symptom of burnout. So in terms of how to combat burnout, there are a couple things. And of course, you can refer back to episode 5, which is Self-Care for Busy Lives, which is a great episode. I'll list them out.
Yeah.
So you should establish clear boundaries between your work and your personal life.
Yes.
Prioritize self-care, like we said, episode 5.
And I think when you prioritize your self-care, I think it's really, you have to look carefully at that and what does that truly mean to you. And that could just be, and we talked about this in our interview, that could just be, taking time to do something that you love right now, like focusing on a hobby or doing something that you enjoy versus, you don't have to take, a $20, trip to Target to get, all these things, for skincare, go on, a $100 spa, retreat thing. And it's, it doesn't have to be super high maintenance.
No, it can just be, exercise, healthy eating, meditation, and especially actually spending time with loved ones.
Or just literally taking a step away from your work, leaving that space for just, a hot minute and then coming back to it. That is self-care that's allowing you to recharge. So that's taking breaks. And then, we touched on seeking support. So you can also look to episode 7, which is a really good episode, which will talk about how you build that support system. And they can definitely help you, pull yourself out of burnout.
You can focus on what you can control, such as stressors and ways to manage or mitigate them, which, again, I think we also talk about in episode 5.
And I think that's a big one in burnout and in general in life is, I think the natural human instinct is to want to control everything. And this goes back to acceptance, and you need to be able to recognize that behavior and accept that you cannot change something.
Agreed.
And then work to say, hey, how can I fix that? And it's okay, that I can't do it.
Agreed. Another thing you can do is focus on mindfulness and stress management and cultivate hobbies and interests. We talked a little bit about this in episode 11, Creative benefits?
Yes, therapeutic benefits of creative expression.
That's the one.
Yeah.
You can, again, what comes with that is taking breaks and disconnecting and reframing your perspective.
Yes. And then look for opportunities to shine. So this can be identify areas where you can make a positive impact and contribute to your work and personal life. So, this could be, hey, if you shine, in the arts, hey, you really love making jewelry or something, or you like to paint, zone in on that.
Or even writing or speaking on a podcast.
Wait, that's okay. But,
don't be afraid to ask for help when you need it.
Yes, and that's a big one, and I think, again, that goes into accepting and then taking that step to change. And that's a really big, these are really big steps. Now, of course, there's probably steps in between these that you can break it down, but I think those are the 3 main, I guess you would say, landings that you get to if you're, on this flight of... I really like analogies, guys.
No way, really? I had no idea.
You're really like analogies. I'm in my head picturing this flight of stairs and you have 3 different landings.
Okay,
and...
Sophia.
Anyway, yeah. So, do we want to talk a little bit about our personal experience?
With burnout?
With burnout. It doesn't have to be super in-depth.
We talked about it a lot earlier when it comes to, I feel like a lack of interest is something I've definitely experienced. Academic decline is one. I feel like self-harm at some point happened. Yeah. And then also I have a tough time regulating my emotions.
I definitely do
too. What about you?
I definitely experienced that whole lack of interest thing. With the pressures of orchestra and everything, I used to really love music when I was little, and I still love it, but I don't enjoy orchestra as much as I used to, and I'm starting to now, and I'm starting to rebuild my relationship with music and violin and all of that. But it's definitely difficult. So I definitely, and then like you said, like behavioral changes and having increased sensitivity and like anger management, like I definitely have that. I go from 0 to 60. I'm very aware of it.
I know what you mean.
So, it's a very common thing. I think people don't have to like feel ashamed by it, but you can definitely accepting it. Acceptance is huge. I love this mantra. So acceptance is huge, and then you can just move from that, and yeah. So I guess the main takeaway would be, if you recognize any of these symptoms, any or not all or all of them, you may be suffering from burnout, and that's okay.
Like, absolutely.
So totally okay. So many teenagers experience it.
But then again, acceptance is huge, and learning to accept and figure out how you want to mitigate those symptoms is up to you.
And then you can work to change it and just, start prioritizing yourself, and maybe you don't have to take all those hard classes, or maybe you don't have to do all those extracurriculars.
Absolutely.
I liked one of the things I said in the interview was, I think if you're doing more than 3 extracurriculars, that might be too much.
Really?
Yeah, because I'm like, one of the things Sophia said was, I did all these things, but she's like, I don't think colleges really would have cared if I did all those 50 things, because they weren't, she's like, she said quality over quantity. And she's like, is it geared toward what I want to do, or is it just doing it because I'm trying to rack up on like stuff? Like, she's like, I don't think colleges would care if you had 50 things versus 5 good things.
Interesting. So that pretty much wraps up our tea journal for this week.
Welcome to Tea Time Talks. Today we have a very special guest joining us. She is one of my closest friend's sisters. So let's start with some introductions. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Hi, my name is Sophia. I went to Parkland High School and I graduated in 2021. And then I ended up moving to Texas. I went to junior college there first, and then now I'm at the University of Houston, finishing up my bachelor's degree in psychology.
Okay. So today we want to talk a little bit about teen burnout, which I think is a really important topic to talk about. So the first question I think we can ask is, how does it usually occur?
Yeah, so teen burnout usually develops over time due to just chronic stress that keeps going on and overwhelming responsibilities. And a lot of time, like for teens, that looks like having a lot of school assignments, extracurriculars, and then also social pressures from other people, whether that's like parents or friends, and then like your own personal expectations. And a lot of time with teen burnout, at first you may feel like motivated with these things, but over time, like without enough like rest and stuff, you may end up having less energy and just motivation in general, and may not like doing those activities anymore.
Okay, so I think we touched on a little bit of why it happens, but I think we can go a little bit more in depth. So let's talk like academically. How do you think, like, why does that usually occur in academics?
Yeah, in academics specifically, I know people a lot of times feel the most pressure in that area, because in high school especially, a lot of times you're thinking about, college applications and getting into a good school. So grades kind of seem like the most important thing when it comes to that, and whether people have their own expectations on themselves, like if they are perfectionists themselves, or a lot of times like parents put a lot of pressure a lot of pressure on their kids to do well in school. And I think between your own expectations and your parents or family expectations, it just makes academics extremely challenging.
Yeah. And I think you kind of touched on like a lot of the driving and adding factors. And I I think even social media and that, we talked about this, I think even in episode 9 when we had interviews with our teachers, and one of our teachers had said, you know, I see how social media has affected the academic landscape, whereas like you feel the need to post like a really good school. Like, oh, I got into the school, and all of a sudden everybody's like a superstar in academics.
Yes.
And I think that like adds to it. And then there's like a lot of competitiveness.
Oh yeah. I know when I was in at Parkland myself, there was a lot of competition, especially among people in like, you know, the AP classes or the honors classes. And it was just crazy how much people would be like comparing their scores, comparing their grades. And then, you know, it only gets more intense when it comes to colleges. So by the time it's like senior year, you're comparing, you know, you want to go to the same schools. And I think with the whole social media thing, you were spot on about that.
Yeah.
People are posting, you know, what colleges they get into. And then by the time it's graduation, you know, all my friends graduated this year. So they're all posting, you know, graduation. So yeah, it is a lot.
I feel really self-conscious about my own grades. My grades are fine.
Yeah.
Like, I'm taking fine classes, but then they're like the kids that I'm around, like I think demographic also adds to it. Like, not to stereotype. Like, I hate stereotyping. That's like the worst thing. But like, okay, like I'm in orchestra, which you were also in orchestra.
Yes.
And like a lot of the kids who, like, if you're in honors orchestra, like a lot of the kids, even if they're Asian, white, or whatever, most of them are high achieving kids.
Oh yeah.
So anytime anything comes out, they're like, oh, what's your GPA, or what's your whatever, and I have a great GPA, like, but then this one kid's like, oh, I have a 4.7, and I was like, oh, okay.
Yep.
Like, and then this other kid over there is like, I have a 4.6, and I was like, okay.
Yeah.
And then I was like, wow. And then I feel like there's a lot of competition just in like specific groups. And I wonder how that differs between like what groups you hang out in, because I'm like, I feel like the music department's really competitive.
Oh yeah. No,
and
for
I don't
sure.
know why. Even with like violin, like even with the instrument itself, they're so competitive.
Oh yeah.
It's really like exhausting.
Yeah, and I know we'll probably touch on extracurriculars later too, but it's the same way for that. And I think there is like a big correlation. I mean, I know I was in orchestra, and those were probably some of the most competitive people I have ever met to this day. So.
Yeah, I don't think the sports could top that sometimes.
Yeah,
you think you're competitive, but go.
Yeah, they're competitive in different ways.
Yeah,
and I think that like touches upon like what you said about different groups and the sports, or some different sports may be competitive when it comes to that, but may not be as competitive when it comes to academics. So it all depends on the people you surround yourself with.
So the next one I think we have here is, why do you think it's so hard to get out of like the burnout cycle? Like, it's a very vicious cycle.
Yeah. So I think it's hard because when you are burned out, you know, it's after chronic stress. So you are extremely exhausted. Yeah. And when you're exhausted, then you don't want to do anything. And you may just be tired, you know, feeling depressed, really anxious. And then that may end up, you know, you may end up not getting all the work done that you want to get done. And then when that happens, you're like, oh no, like you're putting more stress on yourself now to like do better. And then there's just all the guilt that you have with, you know, taking breaks. And just all of that combined is just this repetitive cycle of feeling burnout, then feeling bad about yourself, then trying to make up for it, but then tiring yourself out from trying to make up for it.
Yeah. And I think laziness, like, kind of, people feel lazy. Like, I think I'm definitely burned out. Like, especially like in the atmosphere we're in, I get burned out really easily. And so, but I feel lazy. And then I was like, that, I think that's like a big thing that people struggle with. They're like, okay, but if I'm not doing anything, then I'm like lazy. Like, I'm not doing anything. Like, how do you differentiate like the laziness from like, no, I'm taking like a healthy, good break. Like, I need this break. I'm not being lazy, versus, okay, you're actually being lazy.
Yeah. I think you kind of differentiate that, because if you were being like purely lazy, then you would have literally been doing nothing to get up to that point. But when it's burnout, it's like you can evidently see that you were constantly juggling all these tasks and like constantly putting pressure on yourself which ended up leaving you to just feeling extremely tired. So that's where it's different. Like if you were lazy, then you were like really not doing anything at all, to get to that point.
I think I saw something the other day that was like, if you were lazy, you would have been enjoying it versus like feeling like guilty and stressed out while you're doing nothing.
Yes.
And I think that's like a really funny thing because I was like, I feel lazy like when I'm lying in my bed and I'm like, okay, I'm rotting. I should be doing something.
Yeah.
And then I feel really lazy. And then I saw that and I was like, okay, so maybe I'm burned out and maybe I'm not lazy and maybe I'm just exhausted.
Yeah. No, I've heard that before too. And I definitely think that is true. I mean, if you were truly lazy, you wouldn't be, putting all this pressure on yourself and feeling like you need to be doing something.
Yeah. Do you think there's such a thing as like a productive break?
Yeah, I think there is. I think breaks in general are productive in the sense that they recharge you. Mm-hmm. And it may not be the type of productiveness that we, correlate productiveness with. But at the end of the day, breaks are productive because how are you supposed to recharge and get to the point where you could be doing other work again if you don't take these breaks?
Actually, that's a really good way to look at it. Because I don't feel like my breaks are productive. But then again, people do take breaks that aren't productive. Like, they need to take a break. Mm-hmm. But then how do you differentiate, like, a productive break from a non-productive break?
Well, what types of things do you think are, like, not productive?
Going on your phone.
Going on your phone. Okay.
People, like, rot and, like, they'll scroll for, like, an obscene amount of hours. Like, I know, like, I got caught and as I'm, like, watching, I'm like, get off your phone. Right. You need to do something else.
Yeah. So I guess if we take that example, I think that is not productive in the sense that, you're doing it for hours and hours and hours, doom scrolling. So I think productive breaks are more of, like, when you're scheduling small blocks of time. Mm-hmm. And it's not just because it's like the phone. I mean, if you're going on your phone for like, 15 minutes in between, after doing 2 hours of work, that is still productive, even if you're going on your phone and scrolling. It's just about like, setting these limits for yourself.
Yeah. I think limits are really important. I think one of the things that happens while you're burned out is when you get caught in that vicious cycle, you also get caught in these really long breaks. Yeah. When you allow yourself, but then those breaks aren't like you said, they're not productive. And the entire time you're feeling terrible about taking a break. And I think that prolongs the break even further. Yeah. Like, I'll sit there, but I'm like, but I'm really tired and I need a break. And then it'll keep going. And then I'll look at the time and I was like, wow, all the things I could have done in that hour I was sitting here doing absolutely nothing, I didn't get done. So I think that's hard because people get caught in that cycle. And then one of the things that me and Sophia talk about a lot is we like to even if it's not like a phone break, we like to get up and leave the space because I think it's harder to get caught in that obscene break. Because for me, I'm like, if I sit in front of my computer that's not doing anything and then I'm like, okay, I go on my phone for 15 minutes, but I'm like, I'm sitting where my work is. Mm-hmm. So theoretically, at any point, I could pick it back up again. Right. But rather than leaving the space and I have to go back to start it and be like, okay, I have to end the break. That's just how it is for me personally, though. Yeah, no, I feel like that is what happens to a lot of people is they're still in the space where they're working, and I'm like, I think you should leave. Yeah. So that your brain is taken out of that space. Yeah, for sure. I think changing up what your break is and not, not being in the same spot, not always going on your phone as your break, changing it up, doing different things, stepping outside. That's a big one. Stepping outside the room, actually going outside outdoors is especially helpful. So, doing all different types of things, not just your phone. I like going outside. I wish I could work outside more. You should. I try, when it gets nice out, I go outside. But I think, chemically, the vitamin D thing, I always talk about, I'm like, oh, I'm vitamin D deficient. Yeah. Because I am. And I was like, I run on the sun. I have to be outside. But I wish it was more accessible during the school day because I think you can burn out during the school day, but you can't take a break. Yeah. I wonder how you're able to get that break when you're going through a 7-hour school day and it's extremely long. Yeah. I absolutely hate the schools. system.
Oh yeah,
it's terrible.
Yeah, and I think the school system's also a big contributor to like academic burnout because it literally doesn't invite that time to take the breaks you need, and besides lunch, but even then it's overstimulating.
Loud.
Yeah.
Like, I think some people need stimulation, but then I'm like, there's a certain point where you reach like a threshold and there's too much. Like lunch could be a break from academics, but then you have to like socially talk, and then you get socially burnt out.
Yeah,
like that's a whole other thing. Like,
so it's not truly really a break.
No,
you need that time to yourself to like recharge.
How do you think people get socially burnt out?
I think
that's a big one.
That's a big one. I think people pleasing is like a big reason why people get socially burnt out. Feeling like they need to say yes to everything. They need to maintain all of these friends, and in order to maintain friends, they need to be hanging out with them a lot, and they they may feel the pressure to say yes every time they're asked to like hang out, and then just the mental stuff that goes around it, like when you are, or if you are having like issues with friends, the stress that you have in your head about that, then you may feel burnt out just even thinking about it.
Yeah. I know my mom gets burnt out because she's a therapist, so she talks to like 8 clients every day.
Yeah.
And that she knows she overloads herself on that. And that's like her own thing that she's like, I know I personally need to like work on like setting a limit with how many people, but she's like, at the end of the day, she's like, I can't talk to anybody because I just spent like 10 hours like talking to 8 people and I don't want to do it.
Yeah.
And she's like, and then she talks to the people that are like in her office who aren't even her clients, and then she's just like, okay, I'm really tired, I don't want to talk to anybody anymore. And I think that's like a big thing, is sometimes you just don't want to talk, and like it's okay.
Yeah.
And that's a big thing in high school, is everybody's like constantly buzzing around, and I think everything got so much faster. And I don't know why. It's like, and maybe social media is like a contributor to that.
Oh, for sure. I mean, yeah, I didn't even talk about that, but that's a huge thing too that I totally missed.
We always talk about social media on this. Like every single episode, we're like, social media is bad. We have it, but it's okay.
Yeah, I think social pressure is there as well.
Yeah.
You see all these people hanging out, you see all these people with friends, you see all these people posting about it. You're like, why am I not doing all of that? Like, I feel like I need to have all these friends as well. So putting that pressure on yourself.
I think it's funny that teachers always say like, oh, go out, go do things, like join an extracurricular. And then all of me and my friends make jokes that they're like, you ask us to do these things and then you give us like 50 pounds of homework. Yeah. When am I going to have the time to go out and do these things? And then some people are like, I'm not, and then they feel bad about it.
Yeah.
And now I think the social and academic burnout like mixes in that sense.
Oh, for sure.
Where they like one affects the other. And I feel like I get caught in that because I see people hanging out and I'm like, why do they have the time to hang out and I don't? Where did they go like with their time, and how did they organize it better? Right. And now I feel bad again about not like doing good enough. Right.
Like beating yourself up for not having that balance.
Yeah. And everybody else seems like, I think it's funny, everybody else seems healthier, and then you talk to them and they're not.
They're not. It's
but there are some people who really are like super healthy, and I'm like, how did you get that way? Like, I wish I was that way, and I'm not.
I mean, I feel like you never really know if someone is actually super healthy or not. Yeah. Like, they may say that, and they may seem like it, but everyone at the end of the day has their own things, and they're probably not as healthy as you think.
Oh, yeah. Do you think how do you think burnout like psychologically affects us? So like we can talk like present day and then in the future.
Yeah, so present day, psychologically you're probably like more irritable, tired all the time, lack of like motivation, doing things, lack of joy when you are doing these things that you once enjoyed, having trouble like eating, sleeping, and just being hard on yourself emotionally. I think that's a lot of like the present day stuff. And the future day stuff, a lot of that is the same, but I think the biggest impact that happens in the future is like actually developing like depression and anxiety, and these really like difficult like mental illnesses that often happen because of burnout.
Yeah. And I think I feel like it can be sort of traumatizing in a way, because you traumatize your brain into thinking every single second you have to be doing something.
Yeah.
And I think society got so fast-paced. And our attention spans have, like, gone down.
Yes.
I saw something now, this could be completely wrong, but it was like, oh, our attention spans are now, like, smaller than, like, some of these animals that used to be, like, obscenely had no attention span, and we're like, now we have like the attention span of an ant, and I was like,
sure.
What?
Yeah. And also I think another thing with burnout is like it being harder to focus on things and concentrate and like have that attention span, because your brain, your body is physically so tired that you're not able to focus.
Yeah. Do you think there's a way to repair that? Like, I wonder if, like, there's not, like, a restart button. You can't restart, but, like, rebuild it.
Rebuild. Oh, like your...
Like your focus, like, and, like, getting out of the cycle.
Yeah. I think definitely taking those productive breaks is the way to do that. Like, you can't really, you know, repair that until you take all these breaks that recharge your brain and your body.
Yeah. I think one of the other things, there was, like, studying tactics. There's a lot of, like, breaks. We've talked about this before, like the whole Pomodoro timer thing.
Yes.
Which I absolutely love, but it's like you take that measured break, but I feel like sometimes it's hard for people to come out of that break.
Yeah.
And it's like, how do you make sure that you keep yourself accountable to go back to studying or to go back? And I feel like if you are burnt out, it's so much harder to like start that routine.
For sure.
I feel like, do you think it would be helpful if there was somebody else with you doing it?
Yeah, I think accountability is the biggest thing when you are struggling with that, because I have that same exact struggle too. And I think it's especially harder like living alone and spending a lot of my time alone, because there is no one to like hold me accountable. So I think I always call it like an accountability buddy.
Oh, I love that.
Having an accountability buddy, you know, to whether, for me, I usually use that term when it comes to like going to the gym and being accountable with that, but it's the same way with this, having someone hold you to, you know, getting out of those breaks and going back to work. But if you don't have someone there, I know like setting timers usually helps. Literally just having it keep going off until you're physically back at your desk doing work.
But I think even like with going to the gym, like starting a new routine of other stuff to rebuild like a healthier lifestyle, I think can help pull you out of the cycle.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, I think those are all necessities too if you want to like get back to like having your focus and concentration and just feeling less tired again. Taking care of yourself physically, going to the gym, eating well, sleeping. Those are the big three, you know, to help with that.
I think, well, a lot of people think New Year's resolutions are stupid, but I was like, I think there's a reason why they're like there. Like every time someone says, oh, it's so overplayed or it's so cliche or something, I was like, okay, but think about it. There's a reason why it's so cliche or it's overplayed, because it's a good thought. It's a good thought process. And I think if you set like a goal for yourself, I think that helps pull you out, depending on your motivation. Depending on how well. But then there was also something, it's like, even it's not all about motivation, it's also all about like your discipline. Like are you disciplined enough to do it even when you don't want to and you're not motivated to do it? And that's a huge thing with school. And I think even coming into summertime with like summer work, and everybody's like, yep, I'm not going to be doing that till August 24th, the day before school starts. And I was like, it's a terrible idea, but I know what you mean. Like no one wants to start it until it's like, oh, it's August, I should probably start.
And that's another thing with burnout too. Like a lot of people wind up procrastinating to you know, avoid, or they're just feeling so much stress that they just put it off until the end. So, you know, doing things in chunks as well as you can is, you know, helps a lot. So
what are your personal experiences with burnout? Like, so how did you navigate it, and how do you plan or have recovered from it?
So interestingly enough, like in high school, I knew that I was like burnout, but I didn't really have the physical effects of it yet, which was really interesting, because I feel like I was on autopilot so much, where I was just constantly doing all these activities, like between school, orchestra, tennis, you know, I did a bunch of things. And my body just kept going and going and going, and somehow I didn't really collapse until like the end of high school. And then I had spent the last like couple years, like 3 years, still like trying to get out of that. And to this day, like I'm doing better with it, but I'm still extremely burnt out all the time. And I think that plays into what I was talking about earlier about the future effects. I think I wasn't feeling the present day effects as much of burnout. I was like able to, block it all out, but it ended up having really bad long-term consequences.
Yeah.
And I think that's where you have to be really careful, because it may not seem like it the present moment, but it's only going to get worse if you don't like take steps to navigate it. But on a more positive note, there are definitely ways that I have improved and ways that have helped me. And one being what we talked about earlier with taking care of like my physical self. Like when I was going to the gym really often, it helped. When I was getting enough sleep. Another thing was just limiting the amount of activities I did. I always say like it's about the quality over the quantity. Like I don't need like 500 things on my resume. Like I need to be doing things that I actually think are relevant to what I want to do. And then just doing things in general that I enjoy. And then that's when like hobbies and interests come into play. That also helped me because I was able to take my mind off of these things by doing things like art, listening to music. So yeah, there's definitely a lot of things that I did. One other thing, like having a therapist or having really good friends or support system is like one of the biggest things too.
We have a whole episode on the support system,
okay.
Which was also kind of an interview because me and Sophia brought our closest friends that were like crucial in our support system, and we talked about how to build that. And I agree, like I think when you prioritize your mental health, but you're right, like also with doing like too many activities, like I have that problem too where when I started therapy, my therapist sat me down, she's like, okay, now how many of these things, like, A, do you enjoy, or B, do you feel is relevant? She goes, because I think you might need to cut down on it in order to give yourself enough time to enjoy, like, just your everyday life. And I think that's really hard for a lot of kids because I remember growing up, like, college was always thrown in my face, like, oh, like, you got to think about college, and I got not made fun of for it, but everybody's like, why are you thinking about college right now? And it was an absurd thought to be thinking about it at, like, 8 years old. Like, that's ridiculous. You're 8. You don't have to go to college for another 10 years. But my mom would always be like, oh, college is, like, well-rounded people, and I think that's been that idea has been fed to people, but it's almost been overfed where people think they have to do a quadrillion like extra curriculars. Like I'll see people and I'll feel bad about what I'm doing even though I'm doing a lot because everybody else is like, oh, I volunteer here and I work here and I do this and I'm involved in this. And then there are people who don't do anything at all and I don't know how they're doing that either because I'm like, how do you be involved in nothing? Aren't you scared for like getting into college? So from your personal experience, you've already gotten into college. And I have no idea how much you've had on your resume, but like
I have a lot.
But like, how much do you think that actually affected like the college like decision, like versus you were saying like it's not about the quantity, it's about the quality versus like you're like, okay, it's not really relevant to what I'm doing now.
I don't think that I needed to do everything that I did that was on my resume. Obviously, it depends on, like, what you want to do in the future. But at that time, I was pursuing, like, the medical field. So I was trying to be a PA. So I did all these things. And I did, like, end up getting into, all the schools all the programs that I applied for. But at the end of the day, I still don't think that I needed to do, like, a billion things. I think it was, like, if I had picked, like, the most important things and really, like, built upon that, like that's what matters most. They're not gonna look at did you like do 10 things. They're gonna look at like what specific things were they relevant to what you want to do and like what exact experiences did you have, like when you write about it in your essays or the way you describe it. They're looking more at that.
So that gives them more of like a well-rounded view.
Yeah.
I think that's encouraging for people to hear, because I still feel like that, where I'm like, I'm not doing enough, and then I feel the need to get involved in something else. Or even my family will be like, oh, you should do this, and I'm like, I don't know if I have the time for that.
Mm-hmm.
And that's really hard, because you like, some kids don't even know what they want to do. So like,
yeah
to set that limit, I think, is really difficult, because I see kids who are like way overworked and like don't get home till 10, and they're like, oh, I dance. And then I know a girl who does like 10 sports still.
That's
even with the competitive, like, she swims, she dives, she does gymnastics, she does basketball, she runs. I was like, how do you have time to do your schoolwork and go to all these sports practices?
It's a lot. That's a lot.
But it's encouraging to know that it's about more, like, they look more at the quality. Because do you think you would have still gotten into like good schools without having like 400 things on your resume?
I'm gonna use this as example, but orchestra example. I like between 6th and 12th grade, I think I counted once, and I think I was in like 5 orchestras at once. Ooh. At one period, like literally at one time. And I think about that, and I'm like, colleges literally would not have cared if I was in 5 versus 3 versus 2 even. So for me, it was like that. When I look back at that now, I'm like, that wasn't really that necessary.
I did the same thing. I counted, even with just the school. Like, I don't do any outside of school orchestras. So I'm like, I just don't have time for that. But then I counted. I was in normal orchestra, and then there's the strolling strings group, and then there's honors orchestra, and then there's festive strolling, and then there's advanced honors, and now there's quartet. Like, that's already 6 things. Like, most of which I didn't sign up for.
Those didn't even exist when I was in.
That's what I heard. Sonia goes, no, when Lucas and like Sophia and Conrad were here, they were like, none of these things existed. And I was like, so why did they all of a sudden like come out of the works? Like, I don't understand why we have an advanced honors. Or I'm like, okay, quartet.
Me neither.
Quartet is like, okay, fine, like it's quartets. But and he makes us practice. Like, they're all after school on one day. So if you're in honors, you get to leave at 4:30. But if you're in everything else, you leave at 6. And I hate it every day. And they're like, oh, we get to leave. And my friends who weren't in that, who are now in quartet, and I'm like, haha, now you have to stay. They were like, oh, we get to leave. Bye. Have so much fun. And I was like, yeah, because I'm going to be here for another hour and a half and you get to leave. That's so unfair.
And that's just a perfect example. Like, if you look at all those orchestras you just named, like, you really don't need to be doing all of that at all.
Like, I don't think I need to be in half of these, but I'm like scared that if I like leave one, colleges are going to be like, oh, she was in honors orchestra for 2 years and then she left. And I'm like, I don't think they're thinking that much into it.
They're not even going to notice, probably, honestly.
Yeah. Sonia said Lucas didn't even, by the way, these are all like their siblings. Lucas said he didn't put strolling on his resume.
Yeah, he probably didn't.
And I was like, why?
And he got into a combined like med school program. So
good for him.
Yeah. So it really doesn't matter.
Do that. So there you go. You don't need to go, even if you're like in an extracurricular that has like 400 levels. You don't need to be in all of those levels, which I think is really like even districts. Like I worry about, like, I haven't gotten into districts for the past 2 years, and it like freaks me out because it's just hard and I feel behind. Even in my own, and that burns me out too, which is really funny, because I think a lot of things that kids don't think about is everybody has a different life, and that like contributes to their burnout too, because of comparison. Like, personally for me, I didn't get lessons, like good lessons, till 8th grade.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
And like, I know Sonia has been going to lessons since 3rd grade. And then we're both in the honors orchestra, and we're both placed fairly high. But then even in that competitive atmosphere, like, I had the other day, someone asked me, like, why do you think you're 2nd chair? And I was like, they're like, do you think you deserve to be in that chair? And I was like, no. Like, I know all of these other people are better than me. And then this person was like, yeah, I agree. And I was like, thank you. I was like, okay. And it happened to be my concert master who said that. And I was like, okay, well, I do agree that, like, all these people should be in front of me, but he's like, well, then why do you think our teacher put you there? And I was like, I don't know. And I was like, but that made me feel more behind And I was like, but okay, think about it. This kid's been playing since he was 2 or something.
Mm-hmm.
This kid's been playing since he was in 3rd grade. And I was like, I've been playing since I was in 4th, but I never got a formal lesson until I was in, like, middle of 8th grade.
Mm-hmm.
And I constantly put that pressure on myself that I was like, I should be better at this. Because look at all the kids around me. Like, oh, they can play this and they can play this and they are able to get into districts and I'm not. And I feel burnt out just thinking of it.
Yeah.
And I think, like, you're right, like, the competitiveness, but even just feeling like you're behind.
Yeah.
Like, contributes. Like, I constantly feel behind, and it sucks.
Oh, yeah, that's
like,
the worst. It's the worst feeling, and it contributes so much to burnout because you're always trying to, like, overcompensate for, you know, all of these feelings of being behind. So I think that's really hard, but it's important to understand that everyone does have different circumstances, and while some people will dedicate their entire life to a certain extracurricular, others may not or may not have had that opportunity. So it's really important to, like, distinguish that.
I think acceptance is also big in recovering from that too. Like, I have sat here and accepted, and I was like, I'm not gonna be a violinist as my professional career. That's just not good. Like, I don't want to do that. And I'm like, so why am I freaking out that I didn't make all these other things when I'm going to look back in 20 years and be like, okay, like, sure, like, and not care at all. But then, like, you don't get into districts and then it, like, freaks you out. And then I feel really bad about it.
Yeah.
And then looking at all these kids who did, and I was like, oh. But then again, that's an outside of school orchestra that nobody's going to care if I was in districts or not. Unless I'm going to school for music, which I'm not.
Yep.
So it's okay.
Yeah. No, exactly.
So I think acceptance is a huge one. Okay. How do you think school, like, in general, adds to it?
Especially, I think with high school, especially, they give so much homework and tests, more than college for sure. So you're constantly being, like, bombarded with assignments, and just constantly doing all of these things makes you more tired, takes up more of your time. And with that, and on the top of, like, all the pressure that you have to do well, just combined, school is just not a great environment for burnout people. Yeah.
I think, well, do you remember, like, your teachers constantly being like, oh, in college this is not gonna fly, or in college this is gonna happen? Like, I remember that happening all throughout all levels of school. Like, starting in elementary school, like in 5th grade, they'd be like, oh, in 6th grade, you can't do this, or they're not going to let you do this. And then I get to 6th grade, and that didn't happen. And then the same thing with 8th grade. Like, I remember the one time someone's like, in high school, they're not going to let you be on your phone. And I was like, that's literally a lie. Like, everybody's on their phone at all hours of the day. Yeah. So, like, I remember my teacher saying, like, oh, college is not going to like this, or you're going to get more work in college, or it's going to be even more. Like, do you think any of those things actually correlated to college?
I don't, in terms of, like, the homework thing, like, definitely not. You don't get as much, like, busy assignments. You'll have other types of assignments, like pretty big papers, or, like, just big exams that cover more material. But in terms of, like, the type of, like, busy work, it'll be less of that. So you will have to figure out how to manage your time better, but it'll feel different. Yeah. It's not the same.
Like, I always say, like, they're like, oh, you should start studying for your test, but I'm like, I don't have time to study for my test when I have to do all these 15 other assignments that are kind of just to enrich my learning, supposedly. Yes. And I'm like, this feels like it's busy work, and I'm like, I don't have time to study when I have to do all this busy work. And then I wonder if in college, I'm like, well, in college, I'll have time to actually study for my test. Yes. Which I hope is true.
Well, it also then comes with its own challenges, though, of being able to manage your time. Because without, this always, like, pressure to have... Well, because to some extent, having assignments is good, because it'll force you to be on top of your stuff. When you don't have that, it also might come with its own challenges to manage that and be on top of your work.
And there's more freedom in college, too. Yeah. Everybody's like, yeah, you should maybe not go out on that night, and, like, maybe you should stay home and study. Which I think... that's a whole other sect of how do you manage your time? How do you make sure you don't get burnt out, like, doing that? So we did touch on this earlier, but how do extracurriculars specifically add to burnout?
Yeah, well, extracurriculars, the word extra is in it. So it's in addition to the already 7 hours you spend in school.
Yeah.
So it contributes to burnout because it's taking up free time, taking up the time that you could be spent doing your school assignments, taking up the time you could spend, taking a productive break. So the one reason it contributes to burnout is just because it's a big time consumer, but then also the pressure to perform. It's the competitive nature of a lot of extracurriculars, the pressure you put on yourself mentally and physically to do well in these activities that also contributes to burnout.
And I think even kids just sitting there watching, being in the environment themselves, I think is just physically exhausting. Sitting in a rehearsal for 3 hours, getting a 5-minute break is physically and emotionally exhausting too. Because even if you have that competitive nature and then you see kids doing better, it's the entire rehearsal you're ruminating over that, but then you have to focus on your music, or then you have to continue playing when the director or the conductor says to do whatever. And I think that you can get burnt out in 3 hours.
Oh yeah.
It's not even over a time span of a year getting burnt out. There's I feel I want to call it micro burnout. Because it's in a more condensed amount of time, and I got burnt out today, and then I come home and I immediately want a nap.
Yep.
Or I'm every time I come home from school, or my dad picks me up from honors, I'm out. The second I get in the car, I'm asleep, and it's really bad. And I get annoyed because our conductor only has us take 5-minute breaks, and then he'll be like, "Oh, I was generous and gave you 2 extra minutes," and I was like, "I'm rehearsing for 3 hours and you gave me a 7-minute break." Okay.
Yeah.
And and that burns me out. I'm I don't have the energy to play whatever symphony we have to do now because I just played X, Y, and Z pieces, and then I got a 5-minute break to barely eat. And it's exhausting. and then I think the other thing is sports kids. If you're friends with sports kids and you're a music kid, and I see this all the time with one specific person I talk to, they're competitive about how burnt out they are. Or who has more of a hard time.
Yeah.
They're it's harder for sports kids because we're practicing for 4 hours outside and we're sweating, and we're and then somebody else will chime in and we're well, we only get a 5-minute break after rehearsing for 2 hours. And I was why are we fighting over who's more exhausted? And it's glorified.
It is glorified. Who can do the most, who can do the most activities, and who has it the worst. I think that's a big
terrible, but everyone does that. It's glorified. They're well, I have it worse. And I was why are we fighting over who has it worse? I made a joke, the one person that was doing it, I was I feel if someone had a really bad medical ailment, they'd be well, I got hit by a bus or something. And I was why are we fighting over that? That's ridiculous.
That's crazy.
So I think that's a big thing, is there's a competitiveness between burnt out. How burnt out are you? And it's why is that something we're fighting over? And that can just contribute to it even more.
Yeah, it's unfortunate that's what society has become.
It's I'm not burnt out enough.
Yeah.
That's insane. So we talked about setting a limit, but then what do you think are different coping mechanisms, healthy and unhealthy?
Yeah. So starting with healthy, I know I mentioned this earlier, but physical, you want the physical self-care coping. Yeah. So that will look moving your body, even just taking care of yourself, taking baths, whatever you enjoy doing in that sense. And then you also have the mindfulness or spiritual aspect, if spirituality is important for you, doing coping mechanisms, that could be a coping mechanism, meditation, spending time in nature. And then you also have things like journaling, venting your feelings, talking to someone about them. And then unhealthy coping mechanisms could look just overworking yourself, overcompensating, doing more activities in order to cope, in order to distract yourself. You know, you take on more activities.
Yeah. I'm like, oh, wow, this sounds like me. Yeah. But I think there's a big thing is how do we avoid it? Which I think that's really, really, really hard to do.
Yeah.
Some people just fall into it and they don't even mean to.
Right.
Or nobody means to fall into it. But yeah, how do we avoid that?
Yeah. I think just as if you were like, I think creating like a schedule is really important, but in that schedule, putting in like rest breaks. Because just as you were to schedule activities like extracurriculars, you also want to take in time, like schedule from 3 to 4 p.m. I'm going to like work out. Or from 8 to 9, I'm going to like take a bath, or I'm going to, you know, do my painting, or whatever hobbies or interests you like to do. And then another big thing is also like letting go of high expectations or super high expectations, like letting go of the perfectionism that comes with burnout, especially when it comes to like minuscule assignments, you know, just trying to get them done, not trying to make them perfect.
Yeah. Okay. You said you recognized it. So how did you recognize the fact that you were burnt out, even if there weren't like the physical aspects of it?
I mean, I think there was the biggest physical of just being tired all the time, like not being able to do anything without falling asleep. But more so if you're talking about mentally, I think the biggest thing was just not enjoying anything anymore. And not enjoying things that I used to enjoy, because everything just felt like so much work and everything felt like so much pressure to perform well, that it was so hard to do anything for fun.
Yeah. And I think you were also saying like you were on autopilot, and I think a lot of people end up going on autopilot because they're just like go, go, go. And that's like, it's terrible, and I think it increases their anxiety, and you're like, oh, well, I'm not doing enough, or I'm not thinking, and then just even counting like the amount of stuff you were involved in. Like if you're involved in like 15 things, like you probably are getting burnt out, because do you really need to be doing those 15 things?
Right.
No.
Right.
There's not enough time in a day to do all those things. Like I thought about it, like, and I think a lot of people make excuses for themselves too, where like, oh, well, it helps with this, or it's not that much work. Like, I found myself doing that when my therapist asked me, she's like, well, do you need to do class officers next year? And I was like, well, that actually doesn't seem like that much work to me, because we don't really get together all that often. But she was like, okay, but you failed your chemistry test because you were, like, more focused on whether or not your homecoming float looked good. And your script, and you had to do the case, and I was like, okay, you have a good point. And she was like, you might not need to do that next year. And now thankfully, I'm sad, but I did not get reelected. But then maybe that's like a sign that I'm doing too much, and that's one less thing I have to worry about now. Like, I don't have to worry about whether or not my officers are getting our display case done, or if they're doing their part, or if I have to sign something, or what I have to do for Mr. Parkland or something like that. So I think people can recognize it if they're just even like involved in like more. I feel like more than 3 things is like enough. Like if you're in more than 3 things, then you might be doing too much. Yeah, might be doing a little bit.
I think it's important like 2 things. One is setting a limit, and I don't know, I'm a big numbers person, so I like that. Like I'll put numbers to things, like okay, I'm gonna do 3 things today, or 3 main goals. And then also just everything is just about prioritizing, right? So if you know, like for your example, the class officer, like is that really, asking yourself, is this really important? Is this my priority? Or is my chemistry test my priority? And then like making decisions based off of that.
Yeah. So is there anything else that you would like to add?
I don't think so. I think we covered a lot.
Yeah, I think we did. So basically we can set limits by, you know, looking at what we're doing. Taking measured breaks is fine, but, you know, don't get caught in, like, your 2-hour doom scroll. And then, like, recognizing the signs of, like, if you're really exhausted, or if you are doing too much and you have over 3 activities, or you're not enjoying things, you may need to, like, take a step back and, like, accept where you are in life and kind of just refocus yourself. I think that's really important. So,
acceptance is huge.
I like that. Acceptance is huge. So Thank you so much for joining me today. I really enjoyed talking to you.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, of course. So that wraps up Tea Time Talks.
Thank you so much for listening to this episode.
I hope you'll join us next week on
Sip and Spill.